Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session of the Magdalene Heart Path online course. I'm Mercedes Kirkel, the guide and facilitator for this course, and I am so glad to have all of you here and to be starting up another series of teaching this material that I am so passionate about, that I believe in so deeply, that I've seen incredible changes with in my life and in other people's lives. And so it's a great joy to me to share this with other people because I have so much confidence in it being transformational. So welcome, and I'm really glad you're here. So what I would like to do is to start out with a little bit of introduction about me and my background. I think most of you are familiar with me, so I'll keep this short. I do have the website, mercedeskirkel.com, and there's lots of information about me and my work there. So if you want more, that's a good place to start. And then, of course, there's the books. I am the author of 2 books of channeled teaching by Mary Magdalene. The first is Mary Magdalene Beckons, and the course material is based on that book. And then the second one is Sublime Union. So those are all also great resources to find out more about me and also to find out more, especially about Mary's teaching. But I am a guide, let me start over. I am a channel for Mary Magdalene and Yeshua and some other beings of light as well, but Mary Magdalene and Yeshua are my primary guides. And I have been blessed to bring forth amazing teaching through them. And that is what I am sharing with people in these classes. And the way this class came about is that when I wrote the first book, Mary Magdalene Beckons, I was doing private sessions with people, and people would come to me and say, "Oh, I read that book and it was just amazing. And I'm so in awe, and thank you so much. That teaching is incredible." And then I would start to work with them in the session, and I would ask them to apply the teaching. And I saw that they didn't really understand how to do it. And if I guided them through it, they could. But on their own, they didn't really, for whatever reason, weren't able to make it their own and really make use of it independently. And so that's why I began teaching this class, was to be a bridge for people, where people could take this teaching and really internalize it so that it could become yours and a guide that you're using in your life on an ongoing basis as a spiritual practice. And what I've seen from teaching this course now many times to many people is it really works. And I'm so thrilled to say that if people stick with it and go through the 6 sessions and do the process, especially listening to the recordings in the week and engaging the practice suggestions that are part of the recordings, and then coming to these coaching calls as much as you're able, it really works. And by the end, I'm seeing the light bulbs go off and people telling me these amazing stories about their life. So that's, so wonderful to me, because that was my desire and my intention in creating this. And I feel like it's happening. So that's a very, very short introduction to me, but I think that's enough for now. And what I would like to do is to invite all of you to briefly introduce yourself, to say your name, to say where you are located, where you're joining this call from, because we are coming in from many places. And to say briefly, like just one or a few sentences, very briefly, what drew you to this course and what is it that you would like to get out of the course? And part of this is, I really believe that when you state your intentions out loud to the group, that it's a way of empowering what you really want to receive from this course. And everyone who's listening, I ask you to send your blessing to the person, that they really receive that and that this really manifests for them. So this is partly empowering what each of us want from being here and doing this course. So, name, where you're from, what drew you to this course, and what you would like to get out of it. So, I just invite you, whoever so moved, to unmute yourself and let's hear from you.
Good morning. My name is Chris Kahn. I'm calling in from Oakland, California. And what brought me to this course was, meeting you and talking with you at some of the events that we've been at together. Also, Ellen has been inspiring me as well. Really, it's to understand the balance of the divine feminine that is within all of us, and how that also relates to the sacred masculine, but just really being able to feel that balance and have that deeper understanding and connection to that internally. What I'd like to get out of this course, I think it's more that awareness of that balance, so that I can acknowledge those parts of myself and understand those parts in others as well.
Thank you so much. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Ellen, and I live in Oakland, California. And like Chris, I met you and was inspired by your passion for this material. And then I bought your book, and I was just like devouring it and thinking, yeah, this has been my life's journey to get out of my mind, because I have a very dominant mindset for perceiving the world and operating from. That's my operating system, and I've been working the last 10, 12 years to get my heart to be my operating system, but the mind doesn't want to quit. So anyway, I'm excited to set my intention, which is to sustain living from my heart as my operating system.
Thank you so much. And welcome.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jenna.
Hi.
Hi. So I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And what drew me to this course was reading the book Mary Magdalene Beckons. And like I think we've already heard too, it really spoke to me. And I had a lot of aha moments. And that's been actually a few years ago since I read the book. So when I heard that, you were doing this program again, this course again, I thought I really must partake, because it's kind of like what Ellen said. I feel like I live a lot in my head, and yet I know my heart is calling me to be and do things in a different manner. So how do I best blend those and really come into right relationship with both the masculine and the feminine energies? And that's really my intention for this course, is to step into and really start to embody without making any excuses for that. So I'm hoping to embody much more of the feminine qualities that I know I have in me. So there you go. Thanks.
Thank you. And welcome.
Hi, I'm Bob from currently Kalaheo, Hawaii, and from actually Southern Oregon and Northern California most of my life. I've retired over here, and I am doing some chaplaincy work, volunteer, as well as I've been a seeker, a learner of different spiritual and religious systems for some time. And the concepts that are dealt with here are very supportive of what I have been attempting to embody in my own life. It's not easy, as you have alluded, that the mind and the heart don't always do well together. But they need to, and hopefully this is a good venue for learning that. So thank you, and I don't know what I'm going to get out of it yet. We'll find out. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome. And to the other people who are participating in the course and aren't here at this time, but may be watching this later in the recorded version, welcome to you also. So, just a little reflection on a few things that I heard. This course is very much about the journey from our mind to our heart. And it's taken me a long time to get that very simple version of this is really what it's all about. We're going from our mind to our heart. And I think many people who are spiritually involved, spiritually awakening at this time are very aware that this is important and have this strong desire to be more heart-based in our awareness, in our living, in our approach to life altogether. And I think for a lot of people, it's still at kind of like the wish level as opposed to what can I do to really make a difference for this to really happen? And that's what I so love about this teaching is one of the things that I learned from channeling Mary and having such a strong connection to Mary Magdalene is that she is eminently practical. She always comes back to what can we do practically to make a difference. And this teaching actually gives you practical things to do that can make this happen, this shift from the mind to the heart. So you can actually start to engage a process for this to happen, as opposed to having the longing, but maybe feeling not fully empowered. How do I do that? How do I, maybe you've made some steps, maybe you're partly there, or sometimes you have that experience, but not all the time there the way you would like to be. So I have a lot of faith in this material to really bring that to people. So, and the other thing is that it's also very valuable for the people that you relate with in your life to have a tool for connecting with their heart. And so it works both ways. It's for shifting yourself and your own ability to be heart connected yourself, but also to make that connection with others. And with that said, I am going to go to my notes here and see what the next step is that I want to talk about. So give me just a moment. Okay, so I want to mention a few things about this process, and hopefully this is not news that you've already figured this out, but just in case, I like to go over it. This is a 6-week course, and every week there's a recording, a presentation from me that you can listen to during the week on your own time. And each time it's about a 1-hour recording, and it's broken into smaller segments, 3 or 4 smaller segments. I recommend listening to that recording as early in the week as possible, because that will give you the full week to really be integrating this material and living with it, engaging the practices, if you choose the suggested practices, and you'll get the most out of the course if you do that. So I really encourage that. There's also a study guide that you can download, and I found that that's a really good tool as you're listening to these recordings to be filling out the study guide. That helps a lot of people to, really integrate it even more, take it a deeper level. So I recommend that. And then there's also handouts for each week. For example, this week there was a handout on judgments, and I recommend downloading that so you have access to that as you're listening to this material, as you're contemplating it during the week. I also recommend bringing the handout with you to these coaching calls because we may be referring to it and using it. And then there's practice suggestions at the end. I mentioned this already, but something else I want to say about those practice suggestions. At the end of the presentation for each week, there's practice suggestions. I also ask that you bring your responses to those practice suggestions to this coaching call each week because we may be referring to it in the coaching call. So, and then on Saturday morning, we'll have this live coaching call to go over the material from the week. So that's the basic structure and the way we'll be working with this material. So one of the things I want to start out with is just reflecting on the presentation for this week, and the focus was about judgments, learning about judgments, and how to remove blame and judgments from our life. So I want to start out with just asking, are there any questions from, having listened? Hopefully everyone's listened to the presentation at this point. Do you have any questions about the material? Or also any considerations, anything you noticed relative to the material this week since you listened to the presentation? Any thoughts about it?
I found it extremely challenging not to be judgmental in almost every sentence that I make. Like, okay, that's a judgment, that's a judgment, that's a judgment. How do you talk? Last night, like Chris and I were saying goodnight to each other, and it's like I guess we were getting too analytical, but like even saying sweet dreams, is that a judgment? Your heart? How do you say goodnight from your heart? It was funny, but yeah. So I'm really excited about your nonviolent communication background in helping with shaping our communication, better so that we can talk, because our words are so important.
Yes, and we do draw on the tools that Marshall Rosenberg brought forth through nonviolent communication, and Mary made use of that. She said this is an excellent program and practice for going into our heart. And it's funny because originally I was like, well, I wasn't sure I was completely comfortable with that she was making use of this material from, this other teaching. And she said, oh, don't worry about it. He's one of us. So, yeah, we definitely do. You will. And if you have a background or you're familiar with nonviolent communication, you'll definitely see the similarities and the practices that we're drawing from. And that'll be a help, which is really great. So the other thing I want to say about that is that the first step in change and transformation is awareness. And so this is generally what happens with this first week is hopefully by the end of, going through the listening to the presentation, doing the worksheet, and this coaching call, you start to really have that awareness of how deeply enmeshed we are with judgmental thinking. And that's the beginning of change. And then what we're going to be doing is in the next weeks coming up, especially the next 2 weeks, week 2 and week 3, we're going to be introducing, if you stop making judgments, what do you replace that with? So that it's not like you just can't ever say anything anymore because everything you say has judgment in it. So this is a process that we're going to be building over these 6 weeks. And part of what I always encourage people, especially in the beginning, is to be really patient with yourself, because especially after this first week, when you start to get the glimpse of, oh my gosh, I really see what judgmental thinking is and how deeply it seems to be woven into the fabric of, so many things. And for a lot of us, so many things that I'm doing. To really be patient with yourself, and you will be getting this next, step over the next few weeks of, okay, how to replace that with something else. But it's a really deep process. So I found that it's really, really helpful to break it up into these chunks. And that's why we do it this way. So this is just the first chunk, and hang on, there's more coming that will help. Any other thoughts about the material, or comments or questions?
Yes, actually, it occurred to me yesterday. I was reflecting on a conversation I just had in the morning, yesterday morning, and how judgment can be used in conversation through making you feel like you're connecting with someone when you're actually triangulating. And it felt funny to me, like having this conversation, like I was aware, like, this doesn't feel like a very healthy conversation. And yet there was that exchange of dialogue. So there was the other part of me that said, oh, we're connecting. I'm talking to this other person. And it wasn't until after the fact, after the conversation, as I replayed it in my head, I thought, wow, that was just a pure case of triangulation, and that's unhealthy. And so this has me thinking about judgment and blame and how it plays a role in the triangulation piece.
What's happening when we're in judgment is that we're in our mind.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're communicating and through judgment, which generally means that it's reflecting our consciousness, that we're in a judgment consciousness, what we're doing is our minds are connecting. And that's a certain kind of connection. And for many of us, we're used to that. That's a lot of what our life consists of, is mind to mind up here. And so we've just assumed, because we haven't been taught something else, that that's what connection is. But when you start to become aware of this other possibility of when we drop out of that and go into our heart, and then start to have the possibility of heart-to-heart connection, you will start to see that there's a whole different world possible. But for most of us, we just haven't been taught that. We didn't know that that existed as even a possibility. Or we drop into it occasionally. You fall in love with someone and you have this incredible heart connection, but it feels like, it just happens to you. And then sometimes you fall out of love. And then, like, how do you get it back? It's like you're kind of a passive recipient of it, as opposed to something you can actually create in an ongoing basis, and not just with one person who you fall in love with, but have this be your ongoing relationship to life altogether. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
I might have missed something at some point, but the concept of triangulation, Jenna, can you or Mercedes expand on that just a little bit? It makes perfect sense. I don't quite understand where it's going.
Jenna, would you like to give like a practical example of what was happening that you're calling triangulation?
Right. So first I'll think, in the simplest terms, think of just three different people, right? And you draw a triangle. And so that's how kind of your connection. So two people over here, if you're looking at the video, it's like up and maybe to the right or to the left, are connecting because they're talking about this other person. And so it feels like that's what we call the triangulation.
So the judgments were the thoughts about the other person.
Yes. Yes. And for this particular conversation, we felt that we were syncing with each other because we had the same type of mindset. Like, right, this is wrong. And then the dialogue, which ensued for a few minutes, was all about how this other person is wrong and how could she do that, and that's just a terrible thing. And so it felt like like we were connected. And I say it feels like a false connection because we're connecting based on somebody else, somebody outside of us, and we're judging and placing blame.
Right. And that's what happens whenever we're involved in judgment, is that we're basically projecting out there as opposed to bringing it in here. And that's another way of looking at what we're doing in this process. Our brain is the first kind of projection where we take it up into our brain and then we make it about something that exists out there, as opposed to this is really going on in me and in my inner life and what you could call my heart, my core, my essence. So I think in this particular situation, I can understand that triangulation energy. It may not always take that particular form where you're talking about, a third person, but it will always take the form of projection out there. That's the key feature. Is that helpful, Bob? Okay, great. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so the next thing that I want to do, and hopefully this is review from the presentation, but it's a really, really important point that's kind of the foundation of the process that we're building here, is to clarify when we're talking about a judgment, what does that mean the way that we're using it? Because many people use that word judgment, and sometimes, people can use it in different ways to have different meanings. And we're using it in this course and in relation to this material in a very specific way. So I want to ask that as a question. What would you say is the definition or the meaning of judgment?
I would say it's making someone right or wrong.
Yes, that is the very essence of it. And thank you for being so clear about that. It's assigning rightness or wrongness to something. I very much agree with that. And that is how we're using it in the context of this material. And very closely related to that is assigning the idea of goodness or badness to something. That's another way of right, wrong, good, bad. And then there are all kinds of other ways, like we can say, that was appropriate, that was inappropriate. And that's, another variation of that was right, that was wrong. But in its very simplest form, it's this assigning rightness or wrongness to our world. And part of what Mary is teaching here is this transition from what she calls third dimensional consciousness to fourth dimensional consciousness. And one of the hallmarks of third dimensional consciousness is duality. And in terms of our thinking and the way we implement it, this idea that there are things that are right and there are things that are wrong it's very tied up with that whole thing. And in moving into the higher consciousness, we're going beyond the idea of right and wrong. And this is a radical idea to a lot of people. To a lot of people, it's like, what do you mean going beyond the idea of right and wrong? You can't do that. There just is right and wrong. But what Mary says is, no, that's actually one way of looking at things, and it's a very 3D way. And that we can go beyond right and wrong. This doesn't mean that everything's the same, that, killing someone is the same as loving someone. We're not saying that. We're not saying that everything is, vanilla here. There are differences in our world, and there are effects. We are affected by things, but the effect is not about right and wrong. The effect is about within us. It's about a heart effect. And this, I think, will become clearer as we go through this progression over the weeks. But for our purposes for this week, we're just starting with this idea of maybe there's an alternative to right and wrong. And what I'm asking you to do is, if this feels challenging for you, to engage this as an exploration, where you open yourself to the possibility of setting aside ideas of rightness and wrongness and exploring what might happen if you set those aside and didn't come from that place. So that's what we're entering into here, is this first exploration. Any thoughts about that before we go on, or questions about that? Okay, great. Then let's continue. So, I don't know if everybody brought your list with you of words that we commonly use, that we call, the list is called judgment words. But part of what we're doing, and this is what we were referring to before, is this NLP practice, is using our words as a way of a window into what our consciousness really is. So it's not about making our words right and wrong either. It's not about, oh, these are the right words to use, or these are the wrong words, and you should never do that. This is to help, again, with that awareness, to help us become aware and to also give us tools. And so words can be tools that can help us to make the kind of shift that I'm imagining, and from what I heard from your original intentions, that you want to make. So this first list of judgment words is especially with this week to help with our awareness, and to notice that when we use these words, we are probably involved in judgment. Words such as abandoned, like, he abandoned me. That is usually, when we have a word like that, it carries with it an implication of rightness and wrongness. That usually when we hear that was bad. It's bad to abandon someone. You shouldn't abandon someone. If somebody does that to you or to someone else, they were wrong. So that's an example of how this comes into our languaging, where we have these words that carry a certain charge in general with them. They carry a certain meaning of rightness and wrongness with them. Let me give you some of these other words. And I'm just going to read sort of randomly from this list. And just, I invite you as I do this to just feel the energy of these words. You might even want to close your eyes while I do this. And we'll do this as kind of like a meditation on judgment words. And just notice what comes up for you when you hear these words. What's your internal experience of hearing words like this? So I'm going to read these words. Abused, betrayed, bullied, intimidated, tricked, ripped off, put down, unloved, overpowered, patronized, harassed, ignored, criticized, taken advantage of. So now I invite you to come back into our group space here, and I'd like to hear from a couple of people. What was your experience? What did you notice and about your inner life when you heard these kinds of words?
Well, it didn't feel uplifting. That's what I noticed. I was really aware of this feeling of like if there was a scale, on one side, like someone's doing the power over somebody or taking from, and the first thought that popped in my mind was there's a victim feeling.
Yes. And this is one of the big hallmarks of judgmental thinking, is when we are saying that we're projecting outward, saying it's someone else's fault, we're also saying we are the victim of that. So while in our minds we might be aware of this externalization of the projection, within ourselves what we feel is disempowerment. And that's what this feeling of being a victim is. Somebody's doing something to you. What else do people notice or experience?
Yeah, Mercedes and Jenna, I agree, about the feeling of being the victim, because that some of those words really kind of place one person, above another, or even internally to myself. I've used some of those words, and I can feel that, how part of me kind of shrinks away with, criticism internally. So.
Yes, there's pain associated with it, isn't there?
Yeah, discomfort.
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. Thank you. Anything else anyone noticed or would like to share? So another aspect of third dimensional consciousness is that it's very much about power. And it's a power of one versus another. What could be called, as Jenna said, power over. And this is related to the idea that there's not enough, insufficiency. So power is the way to be able to survive. If there's not enough, then power is how you get enough so that you survive at someone else's expense. And the primary way of getting power in the third dimension, that is sort of like a consciousness agreement, is by being right. If we can prove that we're right or that the other is wrong, then we have the power, which means we'll survive. And in a very core way, that's what we're doing when we're engaging in this judgmental thinking. We're living our life, oftentimes, I would say primarily for most people, we're not aware of it, but we've been trained to come from this place of making someone right and projecting out that rightness for ourselves or wrongness for others. And there's also this reflex of, what does that mean for me? And what it means for me is, it might mean that you're also making yourself right or wrong. You might be doing it internally to yourself. It also means you're coming from this place of kind of threatened consciousness, that at any time you can lose your power and that other people are doing something to you and you're in this kind of victim place of disempowerment. So all these things are all woven together with this network of coming from this kind of thinking. And this is what we're starting to deconstruct. And like I said, the first level is to become aware of how we're doing it, which can sometimes be shocking to realize, oh my gosh, I had no idea, but that's what we've all been trained to do. So we're in this together. So with that, what I want to do next is I want to go to one other thing that's often involved in this kind of judgmental thinking. And this is something that I'm not sure if this is listed on this bottom of the judgment words sheet or not, but there are some phrases that we often use in our languaging that also indicate that we're coming from this judgment place. And these phrases are something like have to is one of them. Like I have to, or someone else has to, is often based on the idea that there's a right and a wrong way to do things. And the have to is you have to do it that way because that's the right way. So we have this whole kind of framework that we're coming from with these, sub-themes woven in. And these are some of the sub-themes. If this was like a symphony, these would be some of the sub-melodies running through that support this consciousness. Another word that is another sub-theme running through is very much related is the idea of must. Somebody must do something or somebody must not do something. Should, shouldn't. And then deserve is another one, because deserve is related to the idea if somebody does the right thing, then they deserve something. They deserve rewards. And if they do the wrong thing, then they deserve punishments. So these are some of the other words that can indicate, judgmental thinking going on. And then the other one that oftentimes will be related to judgmental thinking are the words never and always. Because this is what's involved oftentimes in proving somebody's rightness or wrongness. Like, you never do, XYZ, what you're supposed to be doing. Or you always do the wrong thing, Or sometimes it can be the right thing. No, I always do that, I'm right, or whatever. So these words are all words that are flags to help us become aware of this kind of thinking in ourselves and others. And again, not to make ourselves wrong, not to make others wrong, to help us realize, this is just a symptom of this 3D consciousness that we are going to learn tools to do something different, to go beyond this, that I believe is going to make our lives and other people's lives more wonderful. So with that, what I want to do is go into a practice exercise. And in this practice exercise, what we're going to do is I am going to read a sentence to you. And I want you to listen and hear if you hear any judgment in the sentence. And if you do, to identify what the judgment is. And then we're going to practice changing how we might take that judgment out. So we remove the right-wrong implication from this sentence. Now, of course, these sentences, we have no idea the context that they're happening in. So we kind of have to guess a little bit. But I think you'll get the idea. And I think this is a very helpful exercise to start to see what these judgments really look like and how we can start to identify them. So I'm going to read the first one here, which is, my landlord is procrastinating around giving me my refund. My landlord is procrastinating around giving me my refund. So do you hear any judgment in there? And if you do, where do you hear it? What points to judgment?
Yeah, I would say it's the procrastinating word. It's not that pure observation. It's a measure of time. It's assuming that he's doing it with a certain intent.
And I would say that there is a sense of he's not doing the right thing. He's doing the wrong thing because he's procrastinating. And one of the hallmarks also of that is that when you have some level of judgment in there of rightness or wrongness, the response that you'll often get is either argument or defensiveness. And I would like to suggest that if you were to say this to your landlord, that's very likely the response that you would get is argument or defensiveness. I'm not wrong. It's you that's wrong. Or I did it right. Everything's fine. Or whatever. So I agree with you. So if we were going to take out any of this judgment that's in there through this word procrastination and make this a non-judgmental statement, how might we do that? What might we say instead?
We could say, my landlord has taken 2 weeks in order to get back to me.
Yes, I agree that that is taking out the judgment. I also would say that we've lost a little bit of the meaning in that statement. There's another piece to this that is implicit in that judgment that I would say is important. And so let's see if we can add that in.
I would say maybe I'm waiting for my landlord to return my money.
Yes, that's the other piece, is that the landlord is doing something and you're having your experience, which is waiting, right? So something along those lines. I'm waiting for my landlord to return my deposit, and it's been 2 weeks and he hasn't done it yet.
So would you say, just based on...
Uh-oh, I just lost you. This isn't, I'm feeling concerned. Ellen, what I am going to do is I am going to turn off your video and see if that helps to bring you, because you're frozen right now. So I'm going to stop the video for you, which I can do on my end. Still frozen. Oh, I'm so frustrated. I really wanted to hear what you had to say. Would everybody else wave to me right now so I can see that everybody else is in? Oh, okay. We just lost 2 people. We just lost Ellen and Chris. So hopefully they will join back in just a minute. And let's continue on, and hopefully they'll be back with us. Any questions about this particular sentence before I go on? Or what we did in that process of going from procrastination to just saying what they actually, the people involved actually did. I've been waiting and it's been 2 weeks and I haven't heard yet from my landlord.
Makes sense. Yeah, makes sense.
All right. Do you notice a difference in yourself between hearing one, my landlord is procrastinating, and the second, I'm waiting and it's been 2 weeks and I haven't heard anything yet? Do you notice a difference in how that lands in you?
Absolutely. There's the charge is taken away. I can really get into the, oh, something occurred feeling versus do I need to, be defensive? Do I need to do something? I don't feel the same charge.
Right. And what we're going to be doing is that charge is actually important. That charge is our life energy that's involved in this. But when we're putting that charge into making someone right or wrong, what Mary would say is that's a misplaced use of our life energy. And so we're not going to lose that charge, although it may look like it for right now this week. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to take that charge, and next week we're going to bring that into our inner life, using that charge to feed us, to support us in our connection to ourselves and in our connection to God.
Mercedes, were we the only 2 that dropped connection?
Yes. So I have a sense it might be on your end. What happened?
Okay.
Did you have a question, Ellen?
Yeah, it was a good one. So I want to ask it again.
All right.
Okay, so would you say that when you receive defensiveness from someone or an argument, that's feedback to you that you are being judgmental? Do you think that?
I would say it's feedback to you that the person is hearing judgment. Whether you are being judgmental or not is another question. I think it's worthy to inspect and see if you're being judgmental, and it may be coming from you. Sometimes you may not be being judgmental, but the person hears judgment anyway, because that's their consciousness. It may be that they're used to hearing judgment from you, and regardless of what you say, they're going to hear judgment because they kind of have those ears on already. It could be that that's the way they think. And they're going to hear it regardless of what the intention was or what was being communicated from the other person. That happens too. And there are things you can do to help them to not hear the judgment. And we'll be talking about that especially on week 6, where there's actual steps you can take to help them hear differently. But the first step that really applies this week is, yes, take a look at yourself and see what you're putting out. And maybe you are coming from a place where you're putting out judgment, and that's why you're getting the response that you're getting.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions or comments about that first sentence? All right, let's go to another one. Oh, Bob, yes.
I just, the word procrastinate definitely is a very judgmental comment. And in the case you're referring to you're apparently talking about really a legal situation, and it's also a relational situation that in interpersonal communication, a lot of times you would say things like, can you paraphrase what you're trying to say? Or is there a context here that we need to discuss versus this judgment? When you're talking about things like a rental deposit return, there are specific things in your rental agreement or even a verbal agreement that haven't been understood. And it sounds like when you say he is procrastinating or she is procrastinating, you're talking to that third person again, the triangulation, versus actually communicating with the person and trying to clarify where the misunderstanding is. And I'm just saying this because I think even Mary infers this, that words are a vital part of our existence and they're important,
Yes.
but they can be utilized as weapons or as tools.
Yes, absolutely.
So I just wanted to make
I
that
think
point.
in pure form, this triangulation, you might think of it, and this is the image I used to have, was that there's this panel of judges that kind of exists, a little above us. And they're the ones who really have determined what's right and what's wrong. And then we have things like legal systems that carry it out. But that we as human beings, and especially as cultures, have agreements. We have cultural agreements about, we all agree, this is right, this is wrong. It's right to follow a legal agreement. It's wrong to not follow a legal agreement, or even to follow an agreement whether it's legal or not. That's an example of what, maybe culturally at some level. So this is my version. I used to have this, I used to live with this kind of panel of judges that existed up here somewhere, and that I had a feeling that they were always downloading to me. That's right, that's wrong, should do this, shouldn't do that, that kind of thing. And that's the ultimate triangulation, is that we're kind of talking to that panel of judges as opposed to really being present with ourselves and with the other person. So again, we're just using these words right now, especially to help us become conscious of what's going on in ourselves. And for a lot of people, like you said, that word procrastination, you said that's definitely a judgmental word. What I would like to suggest is take a moment and notice, how does that feel when you hear the word procrastination, especially if it might be directed toward you, someone telling you that you're procrastinating. Take a moment and feel that usually there's like an ouch with it. I don't like to be told that I'm procrastinating. I don't like to be told that I'm doing it wrong, that I'm bad. And that's part of the baggage of what we bring with this whole construct of making things right and wrong is hurting ourselves and hurting others through that. And that's where the defensiveness comes from, because others feel it. So let's go to another one of these sentences. You lied to me about where you went. You lied to me about where you went. Do you hear any judgment in that? And feel free to unmute yourself and just make a response.
The word lie. You lied. Feels very judgmental.
That is the one that I hear as having a charge and carrying judgment of wrongness.
Mm-hmm.
My panel of judges definitely says that lying is wrong. And if someone lies, they're bad. They've done the bad thing or the wrong thing or whatever. So if you're going to take out the connotation of judgment in there, rightness or wrongness, how might you change this? And again, we don't know the situation, so you have to be a little creative.
Yeah. Either you didn't fully share with me where you went, or that feels a little judgy too, though, doesn't it? It doesn't feel you weren't. No, because I'm sorry. Wow, I'm having a tough time. I want to say you weren't truthful, but it feels like maybe I misunderstood where you were. It was like a misrepresentation.
And I would say that's changing the meaning.
Yeah.
Change the meaning there of the initial communication, which is often what we do when we try to be nice.
Yeah.
Which is another kind of judgment of what we're trying to do often when we're trying not to judge. And we might say, oh, I want to be nice here. So anyone have any other ideas?
It's a really hard one, because every word you were saying was like, oh no, that's judging. Oh no, that's judging. And that's I was wondering if I heard that you were going somewhere, and now you're telling me you went somewhere else.
Yes, I would agree with that. That is just what happened without adding any additional rightness or wrongness on top of it. Yeah. Now, someone still might hear rightness or wrongness. They might hear that and hear that you're saying, oh, so you think I lied to you. But that's a whole other thing, what someone else is hearing. Right now, we're just dealing with ourselves and our consciousness. And to me, that's really different to say, you lied to me about where you went versus, you told me this and now I'm hearing this. Can you feel the difference in that? Okay, great. Let's move on to another one. My partner never communicates with me. I would love to hear from a man about this. My partner never communicates with me. Do you hear judgment in this?
Yes, I do.
I'm laughing because I think this is something that men tend to hear, and I think they tend to hear judgment when they hear this, so that they're being told they're wrong or bad.
Shares or
yes. And what's the words that are indicating judgment to you?
The never.
Right.
That's kind of that absolute. It goes to kind of the extreme end where there's nothing in the middle there. It's either never or maybe always.
Always,
so maybe
yes.
They're expecting that always is good and never is bad.
My partner always communicates with me. Right. And one of the ways you can look at this, one of the phrases I use is that those words are often building a case for rightness or wrongness. So when we hear the words never and always, they're oftentimes a part of building a case of making someone right or wrong. So now the maybe challenging part, how do we change this and take out the judgment without losing the meaning?
Well, I would suggest kind of reducing it down to just the kind of like the facts, which is, kind of, even if you're saying it with just the facts, I still feel that there's some inherent building a case. I mean, why would you say that my partner communicates with me weekly?
My partner communicates with me once a week.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Not to be confused with weekly, strong a week.
Yeah. And yes, if you stop there, most likely you would still have a sense of judgment, even though it's not being explicitly stated.
Right.
But this is the beginning of a process. And so as a building block for a process, it will take us, it will lay the foundation for us going somewhere else other than proving rightness and wrongness. But first we have to extract the explicit rightness and wrongness from it.
Right, got it. So, yeah, I would say it like that, which is, however that frequency is, if you're doing this kind of as that triangulation, then you're obviously talking to somebody else about your partner.
Or even thinking in your own mind.
Yeah.
And my partner talks to me once a week, or the last time I remember my partner talking to me was a week ago. That might even be more clear, rather than, because you're still in some ways globalizing by saying once a week.
Right, frequency as opposed to...
Right, as opposed to right now, that's what's really going on. It's been a week since my partner has talked to me. Yeah. So now we've brought it into the present, as opposed to this global, always, never land. Right. And that's the beginning of personalizing it. Instead of it making about them, we're starting with, this is about me. It's been a week since my partner spoke to me. That's a lot more about me than about the partner. So that's the beginning of it, making it about me and what's going on in my world with me.
What about setting your intention? I love it when my partner is communicative.
I would say you've totally changed the meaning. That there's actually, see, this is the thing. When we have this judgment, there's something alive there. You can feel the energy of a judgment. It may not feel good, but there's this life in it. And I don't want to lose that life by changing it into going away somewhere into, oh, this is what I so love. To me, there's an element of whitewashing in that. We're kind of putting a Band-Aid on this painful thing that's going on and going somewhere else, as opposed to actually receiving the gift in that pain. And again, we're not going to see this until we do this process over the next few weeks, but there's something that's very valuable that's coming through in what most of us are turning into a judgment, and we don't want to lose that very valuable gift. And that's really the heart of Mary Magdalene's teaching here, is that there is something really important that we don't want to lose. And so these other processes, like going into what I really want and that kind of thing, we'll get there. That will come out of this process, but we don't want to go there first. We want to get the gift of this pain. That there's actually, when we are making a judgment of something being wrong, what's really going on is we're having some experience of pain.
So would it be judgmental then to say I feel hurt when my partner doesn't communicate to me?
Well,
And
I would say that's exactly where we're going to be going with this, is taking this into the internal life in me, which is going to show up as feelings and then eventually as inner divine qualities. And this is the first step of doing that.
And then after that, you could say, I feel hurt when my partner doesn't communicate with me, and I feel loved with communication.
I wouldn't even go there, but we'll be building that. Okay. But what I would like to suggest is, even when my partner doesn't communicate with me, has a certain vagueness about it. When we are having this kind of judgment, there's actually something that happened in time and space. And the real work for us of getting out of this right-wrong thinking, which I'm going to take a little aside here. One of the things about right-wrong thinking is we really don't know what actually happened, because all we're talking about is rightness and wrongness. When we say my partner never communicates to me, we don't really know what happened. We're just getting this, judgment about the partner. But something actually happened that's affecting you. And so the flip side of taking out the judgment is to identify what happened in time and space that actually stimulated something in me to even be making this comment at all. And that's what we really want to be identifying here. So in this case, the point in time might be a week ago. I'm remembering a week ago, and that's the last time I remember talking to my partner. So that's that point in time. Or it might be the span from the last time till now, it's been 1 week. That's the real thing that actually happened, as opposed to everything we're in kind of creating on top of it. That something actually happened, and that's what we want to get connected to. Is that helpful? Okay, great. So let's go to another one of these sentences. This is the third time today that you've argued with me. This is the third time today that you've argued with me. Do you hear judgment in that sentence?
You've argued?
I agree. That's where I would say I hear judgment. So, and when we say you've argued, there's kind of like, you shouldn't be doing that. That's wrong to argue. There's that implicit rightness and wrongness in there. So, how might we change this? To take that out and to identify what actually happened that's stimulating something in the person speaking.
I'm noticing that we're not agreeing today. Frequently, that I'm noticing that we're frequently not agreeing today.
I would say that's still global. You're making a globalization about, a generalization about what's happening today. But I would say that that's a step away from the actual thing that happened.
Well, when you're pointing you, isn't that almost blaming too? You're argumentative today.
It's blaming if you bring in judgment of right or wrong about that person. I would say that just to bring in you is just saying you exist in my life. So I wouldn't say that that's inherently right or wrong. I would say that's what is.
So you're arguing today. You're being argumentative today.
Now that I would say is a judgment, because you're saying that that person is doing something that's has, to me, an element of wrongness in it.
Do we have to take out the word argumentative?
And replace it with what the person is actually doing that's stimulating something in let's say you or whoever the speaker is.
You're disagreeing a lot today with what I'm saying.
I would be in a agreement with you right before you got to a lot. Because there
You said frequently. You said,
I would still say you're building a case of rightness there.
Okay, so you're disagreeing with me today.
Yeah, this is the third time I've noticed that you've disagreed with me today.
That's not judgmental.
I would say that's just, and if that's actually what is happening, that's just an observation of what's happening. You might even say, this is the third time today where I've said something and you've said you don't agree with it.
But you're tallying up, so you're building a case by just noticing the frequency.
I would say you're just reporting what actually is in your awareness. Now, you or the other person may hear that as criticism or as wrongness, but I wouldn't say that that's inherent in that statement. I would say you're just saying this has occurred. 3 times today, I've said something and you said that you disagreed with it. And that's what is affecting me as the speaker in this moment. Maybe it didn't affect me at 1 time. Maybe it didn't affect me at 2 times. At 3 times, it's having an effect.
Instead of saying, I'm sick and tired of you arguing with me today.
Yes.
I'm sick and tired of, or I'm
not
comfortable with all the
arguments. And again, if you just stop there, it's very likely that the other person would hear criticism, would hear rightness and wrongness. But if we start with that foundation and then build on it where we're going to go, I think it's first and foremost very likely that you are going to hear something different. In your consciousness, you're not going to be building a case of wrongness in your own consciousness. Instead, you're going to be building inner connection to your heart.
So then where we're going to go with this is how you're feeling. I'm feeling disconnected because we're frequently...
Yes, except that we wouldn't use the word disconnected, because disconnected is something that is actually an action. It's something that someone else does to you, like they disconnect from you. So, or it might also be your inner divine quality that's not fulfilled. But we'll be talking about that next week. But yes, I definitely agree that you're getting the preview of where we're headed with this.
Mercedes, I'd like to ask if the sentence was changed to, this is the 3rd time today that we've argued.
I'd say it's just a judgment of we.
So it's still a judgment.
Yeah, you're just judging the we now instead of the other person. So you're including yourself in the judgment.
This is really good for us, Chris.
This is what we were hoping for.
I would say in general that doesn't tend to improve things much. To make everyone wrong.
Yes, I get that part.
Bob, did you have a question?
I think I'm premature on that. So I don't know that I do, except that the phrase or the sentence you're using, stating that this is the 3rd time today you've argued or we've argued, is putting it on that person. Whereas if you rephrased it in that I'm having concerns over our lack of understanding each other today, what are your thoughts? Is again trying to paraphrase it and taking it out of a judgment of their action and putting it more on, we have a problem.
Yes.
Do you feel that we have a problem?
Well, I wouldn't say we have a problem, because I would say that's still a judgment. So, but I like where you're going with this, because I agree, if I'm understanding you right, that what we're really doing is when we're in judgment mode of rightness and wrongness, we're projecting out there what we've been talking about right from the start, with this projection idea that something out there is right or wrong, as opposed to reeling it back into ourselves. What's going on with me? And when you said, instead of you're arguing, I'm concerned, there's that shift right there.
Okay.
But I don't want to lose this piece of something happened in time and space that affected me. And so we don't want to go into globalization of I'm concerned about how much we're arguing, because then we're back in judgment and we're also back in our mind. So I want to take it into this, it's like an anchor. We're putting an anchor into real life, into something really happened here. And I want to start with that, pinpointing that as my anchor. So that's where we're adding in what did actually happen as opposed to my judgment about it. Okay, here's another sentence. My daughter criticized the clothes I was wearing. My daughter criticized the clothes I was wearing.
Criticized.
Yes, and you hear judgment in that, I assume.
Yes, my daughter tells me, criticizes the clothes I wear all the time.
Yes, this was a personal one that came from me, having a daughter. Okay, so even though I love my daughter, I hear judgment in there that she did something wrong. She criticized. So how could we take out the rightness or wrongness to that sentence without losing the meaning and with identifying something that really occurred that's affecting me?
My daughter told me she didn't like what I was wearing.
Yes.
And it hurt my feelings.
Well, that's the next step. We're going to go into that. So next week we'll be adding that in.
Can't wait.
Yeah, good. Listen to that presentation right after this. So yes, that was the moment in time. My daughter said, and lots of times it can even be as a quote or as much as you can, actually saying what the person said, which might be a judgment. That dress is really ugly. That might be a judgment. But if that's what they actually said, or as close as you can remember what they actually said, you're not judging to actually say that. You're just saying, this is what occurred. My daughter said, Mom, you look like, you look terrible today. You look awful in that dress. And if you have a daughter, you might have heard this at some time from your daughter. Okay, let's go to another one. You drove the car without asking me first. You drove the car without asking me first. Do you hear judgment in that sentence? And if so, what?
Without asking.
I disagree with you.
I'm going to say first.
Without asking me first?
With the first piece, I think that last word felt like the tipping point for me when I heard it.
I disagree with you.
Okay.
Maybe it's not a judgment.
I don't hear judgment in this. Chris, what do you think?
Well, I was thinking kind of related to what Bob was talking about earlier. There's an implicit breaking of an agreement here. That there was like an established expectation, and then something was not in line with that agreement or expectation.
Right. So that may be a part of what occurred at that time, moment in time, is, or maybe if you were going to expand this, we had an agreement that you would ask in order to use the car, and you took the car without asking first. So maybe, we would expand it to that if there was that agreement. But I don't hear judgment in this. I hear this as when I grew up there, and I'm showing my age here because I've noticed that younger people never saw this show, but when I grew up, there was a police show, and I never can remember the name of it, but they had this famous line where they would go to interview the suspects, and the cop would say, "Just the facts, ma'am." And that's what we're doing here. Something did occur, and it might have caused, it had real effects. But what we're doing is we're just saying what occurred. We're not saying it was fine. We're not saying it was terrible. We're not saying it didn't affect me or it did affect me. We're not saying anything. We're just saying this occurred. And that's what I hear in this sentence. You took the car without asking me first. That's just a statement of what occurred. And I don't hear in that statement itself any rightness or wrongness. That's just what occurred.
Dragnet, Jack Webb.
Thank you. I grew up with a father who loved cop shows. I think he loved like a world where right won. So I watched a lot of cop shows growing up. So yeah, it's like if we were to take a video of what occurred, or an audio recording, we all have our iPhones now. If we took it, and we're just saying this is what occurred, and it's not saying everything was fine for it not to be a judgment. No, we're just saying we're not adding any extra judgment to it of rightness or wrongness. So it's a fine line. What I notice sometimes is people go the other direction when they start becoming aware of judgment, is they don't want to say anything that might be heard as, that someone didn't like that, or it hurt someone's feelings or something like that. But no, that's not part of this. We do real things and they have real effects in the world, but we're just isolating that moment and saying this is what occurred. And yes, it stimulated other things. Any questions before I go on about that? Because this can be tricky.
I don't think I have a question. It's very clear to me because at first it didn't sound like any judgment. And yet, as I kind of scan my memory, he says there's been some extremely dysfunctional relationships that I've observed in my lifetime where asking me first was some sort of like, you have to do it this way. Like maybe you ask the other parent or something. So there's been some other stuff in my history that I was like kind of using that as the veil to read through this.
Yes, and we often do that. We bring our experience into it, and that's part of us becoming conscious too, is becoming aware of what am I adding to this? Am I adding from my history? Am I adding from my belief in what's right and what's wrong? What's healthy? What's not healthy? What's appropriate? Oh, when I work with English people, I have such a time getting through appropriate and inappropriate. It's huge. And we have, whether it's personal just to us or cultural agreements we have, this is our psychic baggage of consciousness that we're learning to become conscious of, and then to see if we really want to be using it in that way. Is it really supporting us, or could we make other choices that might be more supportive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, here is another sentence. Oops, give me just a minute.
What can I say something about that?
Oh, yeah.
What comes up for me is that some of the things might be truthful, but they're not useful, right?
And I would say, what's truthful? Is that a judgment?
Well, it happened. It's true.
Oh, accurate to what actually happened. Yeah, so and you say that they might not be what?
It then saying it like that isn't useful, the judgment, even though it seems truthful.
Can you give me an example of what you're thinking?
No, it just came up. I can't remember. I have to go back and think about what you just said, but it just came up. I'll think about it.
Okay, great. Okay, here's another sentence. Those companies are destroying the environment. Those companies are destroying the environment. Do you hear judgment in that sentence? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, it sounds like the destroying is a it is a judgment, because they may or may not be completely destroying, but it's not including the facts of what actually is happening, like
Right.
what is making the impact that has led you to this judgment and conclusion that the environment will be destroyed by these companies.
So there's two things. One is it's not telling us what they're actually doing. And this is one of the problems with judgments, is they're vague. We don't know what's actually happening. All we know is your interpretation that was wrong. Because when we say they're destroying, there's definitely, the way I hear it, there's definitely that judgment of that's bad. They shouldn't be doing that. So if we were instead to take out the judgment and put in what actually is happening in time and space that is causing you to make this statement, what might it be if you were the speaker?
I would say that those companies are reported to leak chemicals into the marshlands. But that still might be a little bit more general. I mean,
well, I would say that's specific enough. Like if you say that, I know what you're talking about. That's the beginning of connection. I have a sense what you're actually talking about. Whereas if you say those companies are destroying the environment, all I know is they're doing something bad. But I don't really know what. But suddenly you've made it where I have understanding of what's actually happening that is stirring up something in you to want to make this statement. So it's the beginning of connection. And that's the other thing about this process, is just by having that clarity of clarifying what is happening in time and space that's bringing up some feeling in you, causing you to want to make some statement, that is the beginning of heart connection with yourself and with others. Understanding, oh, it's this, it's that happened. Okay, here's another sentence. The doctor refuses to tell me what's going on. The doctor refuses to tell me what's going on. Do you hear judgment in that sentence? And if so, what?
I think refuses because they're withholding information.
Which is another judgmental statement.
They're not telling you information. I know, it's so hard. How do you say it? The doctor's not giving me the information that I need. That I would.
Yes. Or hasn't given me the information I want about this situation, or I'm looking for, or that he said he would give me, or whatever it is. Yes. There you go. So we're actually at the end of our time, but hopefully I have this strong habit of going overtime because I get all involved in this and I don't want to stop, but I also like to keep agreements and respect all of your time. So hopefully this has been helpful to start to give you some of the real practical grounded experience to continue with growing this awareness of what is a judgment, when are we adding right and wrong thinking, and if we take it out, what can we replace it with? And this is the beginning of what we can replace it with that we'll be building on over the weeks. So I want to say that Later today, I will be posting the recording of this call, which you're welcome to go back and listen to. I will also I also encourage you to start to listen to the presentation for session 2, which we'll be focusing on next week, as soon as possible, and to hopefully engage the practice suggestions with that. And I also am going to be inviting you to join a Facebook group where you can make comments about what you're observing as you're engaging this process together. Or if you have questions, you can bring questions to the group. I'll be responding to people. Also, others who are in the course or anyone who has taken this course in the past has access to this group. So it's a great way of networking with other people who are working with these same concepts and can help in this process of building what we're building. And that's what I just want to end with here, is that we are building a process, and it's a really big shift. It may seem initially like, oh, this is just, we're just doing a few things here. But where this is leading is to a very profound change. And it's also leading to a practice to start to learn the tools for making this change in yourself. And so the reason I bring this up is because I have noticed from teaching this material that sometimes at this stage of awareness of, oh my gosh, this is what I've been doing and I didn't even realize it, people can enter into a feeling of overwhelm and even depression of, this is so huge. This is everything. It seems like every word that comes out of my mouth is judgment. It seems like every word that comes out of everybody else's mouth is judgment. This is like, how do I do anything about it? And it can feel overwhelming. And so I just want to mention that might come up. I have seen this come up for people in the past. If it does, my recommendation is be gentle with yourself, that this is a big shift that you're undergoing, and there's a lot of help ahead, and that it's actually a good sign. It's a sign that your awareness is really growing, and suddenly you're becoming aware of things that maybe hasn't been clear, hasn't been obvious up to this point. And if it's a big awareness coming in, it can feel a little overwhelming at first, until you get your sea legs and until you get more tools to deal with it. And that's what I'll be giving you over these next few weeks, is more tools. So hang in there and stay with the process. That's the main thing I recommend, is stay with the process and then be compassionate with yourself. It's okay if you make a few judgments. That's what we've all been doing most of our lives. And just notice it and go, And then maybe play with the possibility. Wonder if I could change that. Is there a way? But be gentle with yourself. So with that, I invite you to unmute yourself, and we'll share a goodbye for now. And hopefully I will connect with all of you on the Facebook group and see you next Saturday.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mercedes. Bye.
You're welcome.
Awesome.
Bye-bye, everybody. See you
Bye.
later.